Hi, my name's Sam. Today I'm going to be talking about open sourcing a Ruby on Rails startup. A bit of background on me. I'm a maintainer of HTTP, which is what we're talking about today. Separately, I'm a CS and linguistics student at Cal right now. And outside of all of that, I enjoy going to hackathons, I enjoy riding my bike, and exploring on public transit. So I want to start off by talking about what HTTP is. We're a fiscal sponsorship platform, which means that if you're looking to start a nonprofit project, you can piggyback off of our legal status to become a nonprofit. Often, registering as a nonprofit can take a couple of months. It's a painful process. We've done it before. We don't want others to have to do it again. So we let people use our nonprofit status through fiscal sponsorship. And then we're in charge of auditing them, making sure that they themselves are acting in line with the 501c3 requirements. Why is it called HCB? The original name was Hack Club Bank, but for legal reasons, we can no longer call ourselves a bank. We're more of a neobank, and the reason we are one of those is that we built a platform similar to Mercury or some of the other neobanks you might have used for people to access their funds, for people to issue credit cards, for people to send invoices, send checks, international wires, reimburse themselves, all sorts of things. So we have all the features of a bank. We just can't call ourselves one, but that's all right. Separately, we do each project's taxes. We audit them, and we make sure they're compliant. Now, why did we create this? Well, Hack Club itself is an educational nonprofit. Our goal is to improve CS education, and the way we do this is through hackathons and after-school programming clubs. Now, if you're running a hackathon or an after-school programming club, or really any type of event, you end up having to spend money, and you also end up having to raise money. And as someone who's tried to do this as a teenager, this is really difficult. So these events and clubs needed a way to store their funds safely and also to gain nonprofit status, which comes with things like tax-deductible donations, that sort of things. So that was the reason why we created it. And we are built using Rails. We're one massive Rails monolith, almost all vanilla Rails, ERB, ActiveJob, ActionMailer, ActionMailbox. If you have a Rails feature, we've probably built something using it, and vice versa. We also have seemingly endless JavaScript packages, maybe way too many. We also actually have our own, which we call BK, but it doesn't have a nice, colorful logo, so it's not up there. But yes, and we keep adding to this list. It's not good. Lastly, we have our banking stack. So we use Column, which is a developer-focused bank. They have an API and also webhooks. They're who we do most of our money movement through. So for example, if you send a check through our platform, we'll call Column's APIs to send that check. We also do use SVB. They're the bank account we have used for years. Back in the day, we used to actually only run on SVB and have a connection through Plaid. This isn't the best user experience because Plaid is slow to sync transactions, but we still do store a large portion of our funds there. Specifically, we have a sweep account with SVB, which means that our funds are not only FDIC insured beyond the 250K limit, but we're also earning a fair bit of interest in that on that sweep account. And we use them both before and after the crash. Interest rates have gone up after the crash from them, so if you're looking for a good bank, SVB might be a good one. Lastly, we do use Stripe. They're who we use for receiving card payments, for sending invoices, and also for issuing credit cards. So we use Stripe issuing for that. We have one account with each of these, so that's because we're one legal entity. Every project that runs on us is under the Hack Club legal entity. And then those accounts, one with each, are shared between all the projects on the platform, which means that a lot of the engineering work we have to do is taking a transaction and mapping it to the right organization, and also maintaining separate ledgers for every organization. As I mentioned earlier, we grew out of high school hackathons. Personally, I started as a hackathon organizer. I used HCB to run my own hackathon. I then worked at Hack Clubs on separate projects, got access to the HCB code base, had a bunch of feature requests. No one wanted to build them for me, so I built them for myself, and I taught myself Rails in the process. And then since I started university, I've been working on Bank part-time. And we're now used for more than just hackathons. We're used across the country for many things. For example, we're used by mutual aid groups. If you remember the Palisades fire in LA, this is one of the groups that runs on Hack Club Bank. They raised millions of dollars, I believe upwards of more than $1 million, yeah, to help support communities down in LA. We also have a bunch of FIRST Robotics teams running on Hack Club Bank. And of course, high school hackathons. The one I've pictured over there is Los Altos Hacks. They're a high school hackathon just south of us, down in Los Altos. And HCB is a critical piece of infrastructure. I'm friends with one of the former presidents, and I got a chance to go down to Los Altos Hacks and talk to them. And it's really nice to be able to talk to them, to hear how helpful HCB is, and how much of an impact we're able to do with our work. It's pretty incredible what like having access to like financial tools opens up. It opens up a lot of opportunities for high schoolers. So that's a pretty incredible thing about what I get to work on. A unique feature of HCB is transparency mode. So all of our finances on the platform are everyone can open source their finances through our platform. So a bit like how you can have a public Git repo, you can have a public bank account through us. Every transaction is publicly available. This helps increase trust in your organization. And if you're someone who's donating to an organization, you can see how your money is spent. Hack Club, for example, like the overarching nonprofit, also runs on HCB. We have a $5 million budget each year. Our donors can go into our bank account, see what we're spending money on, and see that we're making an impact and not spending it on ridiculous things. So we at Hack Club open source all of our finances using this feature, and when I ran a hackathon, this was our finances. You can see the bank account hit 0. Well done us. So that's that. Now, at a previous SF Ruby meetup, I said that we were working on open sourcing HCB. And as the title of this talk suggests, we did it. So I want to spend the rest of the time talking about why we did that and how we did it. Because it was a surprisingly long process. It took about a year, but it was worthwhile. So why did we open source HCB? First of all, we wanted to increase transparency and trust in the platform. Just like how our donors can trust that we are using their money and making an impact with that, we wanted our users to trust that we were not only building a secure platform, but we were also building with their interests in mind. Something that's really nice is that now when a user makes a feature request, they can see us actually developing that feature. It doesn't just go into a black box, never for it to be seen again. We also wanted to increase trust about how data is handled, and how we were always constantly working to fix bugs. Secondly, community engagement. HCB is something that means a lot to a lot of people. If you remember, the whole reason I got involved was because I wanted to build features of my own. We want our users to feel like they can be stakeholders in the future of the platform, and they have an ability to contribute back. That's one of the reasons we did this. And lastly, this is like a developer education sort of point. At the end of the day, Hack Club is an educational nonprofit. You can learn things in school, but contributing to a large code base is a different experience to the sort of programming you learn in school. And we wanted to create opportunities for high schoolers and members of our community to get a chance to contribute to a large production code base. And it's also a good opportunity for mentorship. I myself have mentored Hack Clubbers and brought them in, and they've now joined our team as engineers. So it's a really nice way for us to be able to create a learning opportunity from our work. And this is something you can't get in a traditional education setting. Even at university, you don't get something like this. Some other things that aren't as important in our context, but might be important for other contexts, it creates a hiring pipeline. So we can look at people who are contributing to our open source project, and they can be future engineers on our team. It helps with marketing. It distinguishes us from other platforms. We can say, hey, we're open source. And lastly, it's helpful to have more eyeballs on potential security holes in your application. And I'll touch a bit more on this later. Next up, I want to talk about what the process of open sourcing looked like. I guess I'll start off with why we didn't just, there's a button to press. It's not that hard, right? I could go do it in a second, right? Well, there were a fair few things preventing us from flipping the switch. First up, in our GitHub issues and PRs, we had about 5,000, and they were just full of personally identifiable information, including passports. which I don't know why anyone ever thought this was a good idea, but yes, they were there. Phone numbers, email addresses, people's like obscure banking details, all this sort of thing. We needed to make sure that no one would have access to that when we open sourced. Additionally, we had committed credentials in the past. We were using Rails' credential management, but things had slipped through. The code base had been around for 6 years, so the people before us, they were committing things all the time. I myself also may have committed 1 or 2 things, but anyway. Then there was also nervousness about security. Was there something we had overlooked? We have millions of dollars on this platform. It'd be pretty bad if we flipped the switch and immediately someone went in, found a way to get it all. And lastly, we were missing resources for new contributors to get started. When I got started with the code base, it was a slug, it was painful, and we wanted to give people a better experience for their first contribution. So I'll start off with removing PII. We started this project called the Big Scrub, and we hired a bunch of part-time contractors who would help us scrub the repo. Basically look at every single issue, every single PR, and check every single thing said, every image, and make sure there was no PII. We leaned toward the side of caution. If we thought something could potentially be PII, we just deleted it. This was a daunting task. Originally, I was going to do this all on my own, and then I started, and I realized it would take me way too long. So we hired a big group of people, and we made it feel achievable. Everything started off as tagged with unscrubbed, and then when someone would review an issue or a PR, they'd remove the tag, and then they would, if they found PII, they'd add a new tag. And then I would go through and review those flagged issues and go through the process of removing the PII, which is actually kind of painful. So GitHub, if you delete an image from a comment, the image still exists on their server. So I have about 100 threads with GitHub support, which is just this, where I send them a bunch of images and I ask, hi, could they please be removed? There was one person who I believe had to answer almost all of these. I'm very grateful to them. So we wanted to make sure that all the PII was removed. We also had to remove the edit history, that sort of thing. GitHub support was incredible with this. So they handled so many of our requests. And that's really wonderful. The next thing was credentials. We actually started by working under the assumption that everything had leaked. So I went through all of our credentials and rotated them. I think this is a good assumption to work under. You never know. Honestly, it's good to rotate them frequently. You also never know what could have happened. For example, there are local copies of our old credentials file that are probably on some old contributors' computers that they just haven't removed. So we assumed everything was leaked. We rotated every API secret. Then there were a couple of sensitive things that were committed to the code base. And we filtered those commits out using Git filter repo, which is a really handy tool. This did mean we had to basically create an entirely new copy of the repository. So everyone had to reset their local developer environments after we did that. But slightly painful, but it was worthwhile. And then we also worked with GitHub support to remove cache commits and PRs. And then we deleted every private fork from former contributors. So another thing, we had been using Rails credential system for the longest time, but we were a bit worried about the fact that if one key leaked, all our secrets would be out there. So we moved our credentials over to a system called Doppler, which is a startup that does credentials management. And we built our own little credentials module, very much inspired by the Rails module, that would allow us to fetch credentials from Doppler. This also let us have different permissions for different environments. So some members of our team have staging credentials, some have production, some just have development. Plus, everyone who had access to our credentials now has to use 2FA before accessing them, which is a good thing long term. And then on security, we reached out to a security firm to advise us on security. They did a pass through our security practices. The TLDR from them was that long term in open sourcing would be good for security. We just had to make sure we did the launch right. So before launching, we added alerts for any unusual money movement in case anything did happen. Nothing did happen, thankfully. And then we introduced a fair few improved security practices. We started using Brakeman, which is now, I believe, included in Rails. We also started a security bounty program That's a pretty important thing. If you're going to have your code out there and people will constantly be looking at it, you want to give them a pathway to do the right thing and report it. So that's why we started that. We also have a separate private mirror now. So if we're working on a security fix, we don't want people to see us in progress working on that security fix. Then they would know the vulnerability before it could be fixed. So we do those in a private repository and then merge it in once it's ready. And then we locked down production access and started having more granular permissions for secret access. It's a very different world from when I started, which was when we all developed with production credentials. Also a very risky world, so this is a nicer world. And then we audited access to the production console using Consul 1984. And then the next thing was to start writing documentation. This is a big uphill battle for a code base like ours. 6 years old and essentially no documentation. But what we did was I talked to our team, what they found the most confusing, what I found the most confusing at the start, and then we present our documentation in the form of like a guide to X. So for example, we have a guide to how reimbursements work, a guide to how card transactions are written, are authorized. And these are actually kind of general purpose. They do include specifics about our code base, but they also include a lot of information just generally about how money moves in the world. So they're quite interesting reads, at least if I do say so myself. And wherever possible, we'd link to additional resources in our documentation. And an important thing to keep in mind, and this is honestly something that I should be keeping in mind more, our documentation needs to be live-in and updated as time goes by, because things do change. And lastly, we created a couple other resources for new contributors. We made a Slack channel for new contributors to ask questions. We made a bunch of beginner-friendly issues that are slightly over-documented. That means it's an easy win for a new contributor. They feel like they can make a difference. And then we have a really easy to set up developer environment now. Back in the day, you had to use Docker. I am now the only person left who uses Docker on our engineering team. But everyone else has switched over to GitHub Codespaces or running it locally. And we made a script that will set up a GitHub Codespace in a couple of minutes. And then lastly, we have example PRs that people can learn from and build their new features based on. So that's how we did it. Then one night in SF during our team offsite, we flipped the switch and we launched our open source repo. So the launch generated a lot of excitement. We launched on Product Hunt as well as Hacker News. We hit number 2 on Product Hunt, which is pretty cool. We were number 1 for a lot of the day, but we dropped to number 2, and that's all right. We were trending on GitHub for a couple of days as well in the Rails section. We didn't get too many new users, but we did get a lot of excited developers, and that was really cool to see. It was a good thing for us to build a positive reputation with people. And actually, since we launched, we've had a fair few open source projects join us and run their finances through us. And I'd like to think that us being open source has helped with that. Here's us on Product Hunt, which is very fun. And here's our GitHub stars. You can see that when we were private, absolutely nothing had happened. Basically, that line is every time a new engineer joined the team, they would start the repo, and then we had the big explosion at the end. Something I do want to mention is that our code was suddenly out in the open. I've written thousands and thousands of lines in this code base. Not all of it was great. And putting your code out into the open means you have to be open to others commenting on your work. It's a good way of getting feedback, but there is also personal vulnerability involved. The code is too small here, but it's some cursed logic to calculate how we do mentions in our comments, because it's a very hacky thing that I built. Bad idea. Anyway, you have to be open to that, and you have to take that feedback on well, and honestly, you can learn a lot from that. But it is kind of scary having everyone suddenly be able to see everything you ever worked on. It's been going quite well. We've had 20 new contributors join us. That's not an insane number, but it's been nice to have new people contributing to our repository and helping us make things better. We've also had more users contributing ideas. I'll talk a bit about the flip side of this in a second, but it's been nice to see that. It's been easier to communicate with users. There's something really refreshing about saying, hey, thanks for reporting this bug. I've made this ticket and this PR. Here you go. Here's proof that I actually am trying to fix it. That's kind of refreshing, especially because a lot of our users are really comfortable with code. We've also been able to link PRs, code, tickets to people. If someone asks how something works, I can just link them the code and then write a little bit of an explanation about it. And it's also a good way of building trust. And as someone who, this is how I like to communicate through code, I've found this really refreshing. It hasn't all been easy. I will mention that our team communications are now on the internet. Every response on a GitHub issue is on the internet. You have to be a little careful about what you're saying. We also have to carefully respond to issues opened by non-team members. Managing an open source project itself is a bit of a job. And we have to make sure we respond both in a way that is respectful, but also if we have different opinions on our roadmap for our project, we have to carefully communicate those. Yeah. So go check us out. This is our GitHub repo. You can see all the work we've been working on. Thank you for listening. And a big shout out to everyone on our team. These are, the 10 largest contributors, but there are 76. So a bunch of people have worked on this over the years. So shout out to them. Thank you.